Everyone said I hit the jackpot, marrying Cassandra Thorne, the infamous ice queen of the New York legal world. They had no idea that the same top-tier lawyer who commanded million-dollar retainers and exuded untouchable composure in the courtroom came home and transformed into a human limpet, a cuddly, cooing creature who seemed to want to be physically attached to me 24 hours a day. My name is Ethan Vance, and I'm a history professor who just wants a quiet life. Her enthusiasm was driving me insane. It wasn't until she ran into real trouble and turned that icy demeanor on me that I realized just how hard it was to live without her clinging to me. Mr. Vance, I'll repeat myself. Your physical exam results are, for all intents and purposes, perfect. The doctor adjusted his glasses, looking at me like I was some kind of specimen. All your vitals are at peak levels. Your kidney function, in particular, is exceptional. It's more in line with a professional athlete than a university professor who spends his days in an office. My face was ashen. I propped my head up with one hand, feeling my world crumble. But I'm failing, doctor. I can't keep this up. I looked at him, on the verge of tears. I feel completely drained, like my soul has been vacuumed out. My mind is foggy. I almost misquoted the date of the Gadsden Purchase in a lecture yesterday. If this continues, I'm pretty sure I'm headed for a premature death. The doctor tapped his pen on the desk, his tone growing serious. Mr. Vance, the failing you're describing and the exceptional results on this report are clearly two different things. When you say you feel drained, what exactly are you referring to? I took a deep breath, like a man heading to the gallows, and lowered my voice. Doctor, I'm married. My wife. She's incredibly passionate. Passionate? He paused. Oh, a healthy marital life is a good thing. Many people wish they had that. No, this isn't healthy. This is a unilateral campaign of attrition. A dual assault on my mind and body. I almost shot out of my chair. My wife, Cassandra Thorne. Have you heard of her? Recognition dawned on his face. The ice queen of the legal world? Of course. You see her on the news all the time. Composed, professional, and iron will. My cousin's firm hired her for a corporate litigation case. Said she was an absolute force of nature. That's her. I slapped my thigh. Everyone thinks she's an iceberg, a queen of frost and stone. But nobody knows that when she comes home, she's a volcano that could erupt at any moment. My mind involuntarily flashed back to last night. I just finished prepping my lesson plans and was carrying a mug of chamomile tea into the bedroom, looking forward to 30 minutes of quiet reading before bed. The moment I pushed the door open, a long, slender leg shot out from behind it, hooking around my waist. Before I could react, the woman who commanded courtrooms in custom-tailored suits and 3-inch heels, the woman who could silence an opponent with a single glance, was clinging to me like an octopus, wearing nothing but one of my white button-down shirts. Honey, you're back. I've been waiting for you, she whispered, her warm breath tickling my ear, her voice a soft, sultry purr. The mug in my hand trembled, nearly spilling everywhere. Cassie, can you let go for a second? I have an early lecture tomorrow. I tried to reason with her. I know, she murmured, nuzzling my neck like a kitten. That's why we should get to bed early. She put a heavy emphasis on the word bed. What followed could not be summarized by the word bed. It was a long, protracted battle where all logic and reason were thrown out the window. When the battle finally ended, I felt like I had just run a marathon. She, on the other hand, was like a fully charged perpetual motion machine, her eyes bright as she watched me, looking like she was ready for another round. Doctor, do you understand? I buried my face in my hands. I, Ethan Vance, am a history professor. My life's ambition is peace, tranquility, a cup of tea in my hand as I watch the clouds roll by. But ever since I got married 3 months ago, my life has become a battlefield. My wife, Cassandra Thorne, was a legal legend. We met at a guest lecture series at Columbia Law School, where she was a speaker. She stood at the podium in a perfectly tailored black suit, her aura cool and her logic impeccable, transforming dry legal statutes into a fascinating narrative. I thought to myself then that this woman was beautiful, beautiful like a snow-capped mountain, meant to be admired from a distance. Later, we were set up on a few dates through our parents, who were old acquaintances. I assumed a titan like her would never be interested in a quiet, boring academic like me. To my shock, after a few meetings, she agreed to the arrangement. The day we signed the papers at City Hall, I was in a daze. I thought our married life would be one of mutual respect and quiet coexistence. She'd be busy with her career, I with my research. We would be the most familiar of strangers, living under the same roof. Who could have possibly predicted that on our wedding night, my nightmare, no, my blissful life, would begin? That night, I nervously stepped out of the shower to see her standing with her back to me by the floor-to-ceiling window, dressed in a silk robe. The moonlight draped over her, outlining a perfect silhouette. She looked like a painting. I thought, this is fine. To have a wife like this, even in a quiet life, is more than I deserve. I tiptoed to the side of the bed, ready to slip under the covers. "Ethan," she said suddenly, her voice as cool as the moonlight. "Yeah," I answered. The next second, she spun around, crossed the room in 3 quick strides, and before I could process what was happening, shoved me onto the bed. My mind went blank. She leaned over me, her hands planted on either side of my body. Her long, dark hair cascaded down like a waterfall, brushing against my face with a sweet fragrance. Her eyes were no longer the cool, distant pools of the daytime. They were filled with an aggressive, primal hunger. "Ethan, my husband," she purred, drawing out each syllable. "From now on, you belong to me." A buzzing sound filled my ears. Was this the same composed, professional Cassandra Thorne from the lecture hall? The character whiplash was enough to break my neck. As it turned out, the woman I saw that night was her default state at home. By day, she was the ice queen who ruled the courtroom. By night, she was a blazing inferno who seemed to want to consume me whole. Every morning, I dragged my exhausted body to the university. My colleagues would give me knowing winks, assuming I was enjoying the throes of newlywed passion. Only I knew the truth. I was being squeezed dry. "Mr. Vance? Mr. Vance?" The doctor's voice pulled me from my painful reverie. I snapped back to reality, a look of utter despair on my face. The doctor considered this for a moment. "From your description, it sounds like a form of psychological dependency. Ms. Thorne has to maintain a high-intensity, professional image in public. The mental pressure must be enormous. When she comes home to you, someone she trusts completely, she lets down all her defenses and reverts to her most relaxed, even primal, state. You are her release valve." "Release valve?" I gave a bitter laugh. "This valve is about to burst. Have you tried talking to her?" I tried. I shot back. Last week, I summoned all my courage. Just as she was about to pounce, I grabbed her hands and said, very seriously, "Cassie, we need to talk. I think we should maintain a little distance, give each other some space." "And what did she say?" the doctor asked, intrigued. She froze for a second, and then her eyes lit up. I said, my voice full of despair. She flipped me onto my back, pinned me down, and in a voice I've never heard before, excited and breathless, she whispered, "Ooh, I love this game. Is this a new role play? The forbidden love between the stoic professor and the dominant CEO? I'm in." The doctor was silent. I threw my hands up. "You see, it's useless. In her world, any form of resistance is just foreplay." The office was quiet save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. After a long moment, he finally spoke, as if the words were physically difficult to say. "Mr. Vance, from a medical standpoint, I can't help you. My only advice is to exercise more, improve your nutrition. Maybe try some of those herbal supplements for men's vitality." I stared at him. I walked out of the clinic into the bright sunshine, feeling like my life was shrouded in darkness. It was a selfie she took in her office. She had the same unapproachable, icy expression, but the caption was a thirst trap of epic proportions. "Honey, close the case early, so I'm getting off at 5. Wear that silk shirt I bought you. I'll be home to grade your performance later." It was followed by a drooling emoji. My knees went weak. I nearly collapsed onto the sidewalk. Go home? To what? This life was unlivable. I had to run away. I clenched my jaw, spun around, and started walking in the opposite direction of our apartment. But I didn't get 2 blocks before I stopped. Where would I even go? And what if she came home and I wasn't there? Would she be angry? She works so hard. What if she got upset? I ran a hand through my hair in frustration, my mind at war with itself. In the end, reason or perhaps fear one out. I let out a defeated sigh, turned around, and began the slow, heavy walk back to the home I both loved and feared. My feet felt like lead, every step a torment. When I got to our apartment, I didn't open the door right away. I leaned against it, taking several deep breaths. Come on, Ethan, I told myself. All you do is give lectures and write papers. Cassandra is out there fighting real wars in the courtroom. She's way more tired than you are. Can't you just be a little more understanding when she wants to unwind? I try to build up my mental defenses. But the moment I pictured her eyes, blazing with that insatiable fire, those defenses crumbled into dust. Okay, face the music. We'll be. With a trembling hand, I put the key in the lock. Click. The door swung open into a dark, quiet foyer. Huh, she's not back yet? A wave of euphoria washed over me. Yes, I could have a peaceful evening to myself. I slipped off my shoes, humming a little tune as I walked into the living room, ready to brew a pot of Earl Grey and watch a documentary on the Byzantine Empire. Just as I passed the sofa, a shadow launched itself from behind it, tackling me onto the plush area rug. Surprise! Cassandra's face, alive with a mischievous grin, appeared above me. She was straddling my waist, looking down at me like a triumphant little devil. You said you were getting off at 5. I yelped, my heart hammering against my ribs. I lied, silly, she said, tweaking my nose before leaning in close, her voice a breathy whisper in my ear. I came home early just to surprise you. Honey, your performance review. Can we start now? Staring up at her impossibly beautiful, bewitching face, I closed my eyes in resignation. My plan to run away was over before it even began. This was destined to be another sleepless night. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the relentless assault of my alarm clock. I struggled to sit up, feeling like my back and legs belonged to someone else. The spot next to me was empty, though still warm. The sound of the shower running came from a bathroom. Clearly, the human dynamo was already up and at him. I braced myself against the wall as I walked into the bathroom. The man in the mirror looked pale and haunted, with dark circles under his eyes like a character from Poe's story. Cassandra emerged from the steam, wrapped in a towel. Seeing my ghostly appearance, she walked over, her expression softening with concern as she cupped my face. Honey, were you too tired last night? It's all my fault. Her words were apologetic, but her eyes, sparkling and vibrant, held no remorse. They were filled with the satisfied glow of a predator who had just enjoyed a hearty meal. What could I say? I forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. No, I'm fine. I can handle it. A man can never admit defeat. Well, hurry and get ready. I made you breakfast, she said, planting a kiss on my forehead before flitting off toward the walk-in closet. I watched her energetic form disappear, then looked back at my half-dead reflection and sighed. On the dining table was a beautiful breakfast spread. Fresh squeezed orange juice, toast, bacon, and a steaming bowl of something with a very strong, earthy smell, and a bottle of Vitality Boost supplements placed pointedly next to my plate. My eye twitched. Cassandra had already changed into a sleek, gray power suit, her hair pulled back in an immaculate bun. Her makeup was subtle but sharp, her red lips full, her gaze focused. The siren from last night had vanished, replaced by the undefeated queen of the courtroom. She sipped her coffee while scrolling through the news on her tablet. Honey, I made you a special ginseng omelet. Eat up. It'll help you recover. I silently picked up my fork, feeling like every bite was a mixture of my own blood, sweat, and tears. Oh, by the way, she said, suddenly looking up, there's a legal aid charity gala tonight. I need you to come with me. A gala. My scalp prickled. I hated those events. A room full of people in masks of civility, exchanging meaningless pleasantries. I have a faculty seminar tonight. I try to hedge. Cancel it, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. You're my husband. If you're not my date to these things, who is? It's settled. I'll have my assistant drop off a tuxedo at your office this afternoon. With that, she stood up and grabbed her trench coat. As she reached the door, she turned and beckoned to me with a crooked finger. I walked over, resigned to my fate. She stood on her toes, gave me a quick, chaste kiss on the lips, and then her expression instantly reverted to the cool mask of professionalism. The warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by a detached chill. Wait for me at home. Slam. The door closed. I collapsed into a chair, letting out a long, slow breath. Being with her was like riding a roller coaster. 1 second you're soaring in the clouds, the next you're plunging into an abyss. It was enough to give a man a heart attack. That afternoon, her assistant delivered the tux as promised. It was a classic, tailored black suit, understated but elegant, fitting for a professor. At 7 o'clock, I steeled myself and took an Uber to the Plaza Hotel. The grand ballroom was a glittering sea of couture gowns and expensive suits. I felt like a guppy in a shark tank. It didn't take long to spot Cassandra. She was wearing a stunning, wine-red, floor-length gown that made her pale skin glow. With her fiery red lips and commanding presence, she was the undeniable center of the universe. A crowd of men in tuxedos orbited her, their eyes filled with a mixture of admiration, awe, and raw, undisguised desire. She handled them with practiced ease, a polite but distant smile fixed on her face. She was a world away from the woman I knew. I grabbed a glass of champagne and found a quiet corner to observe from. Just then, a handsome, impeccably dressed man, at least 6'2", made his way to her side. He moved with the easy confidence of someone born to privilege. After a few words, the other men in her circle politely dispersed, leaving the two of them alone. "Cassandra, it's been too long. You're as radiant as ever," the man said, his voice a smooth baritone. Cassandra's smile lost some of its warmth. "Julian, you're too kind. I heard you took on that messy Sterling Coal case. How's it going? Any interest in joining forces? The two of us together. We could make the entire New York bar tremble," he said with a meaningful smile. Cassandra's lips curved into a faint sneer. "No, thank you. I prefer to work alone." "Always so independent," he said, unfazed. His gaze roamed over her, bold and possessive. "I heard you got married. I must admit, I'm dying of curiosity. What kind of man could possibly conquer our Ice Queen?" Cassandra's eyes scanned the room and quickly locked onto me in my corner. She waved me over. In that instant, every eye in the ballroom, including Julian's, turned to me. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck, like I was being roasted on a spit. Swallowing hard, I made my way through the crowd. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet someone," Cassandra said, her voice bright. She slipped her arm through mine, her smile warmer and more genuine than I had ever seen in public. "This is my husband, Ethan Vance." I could feel the temperature in the room drop. The gazes of the men around us shifted from curiosity to a mix of jealousy, contempt, and utter confusion. Julian, in particular, looked me up and down, the disdain in his eyes barely concealed. "Ah, so you're Mr. Vance. A pleasure," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast, his smile never reaching his eyes. "You seem very scholarly, not like one of us common folk." I heard the barb in his words, but had no desire to cause a scene. I just nodded politely. "Mr. Croft, Ethan is a history professor at Columbia," Cassandra said, a note of pride in her voice, as if she were announcing he'd just won a Nobel Prize. "History." Julian raised an eyebrow in feigned surprise. "How quaint. Must be a relaxing line of work. Not like our world, all blood and guts. I'm sure someone as refined as Mr. Vance finds us all dreadfully boring." The insult was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Cassandra's face hardened, but before she could speak, I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. I smiled at Julian. "You're too kind, Mr. Croft. History might be buried in dusty old books, but those books contain the wisdom of ages, the patterns of rise and fall. Studying history can provide clarity. It might even be useful in your blood and guts profession. After all, many of history's greatest battles were won not with brute force, but with strategy." My tone was calm and measured, gentle but firm. The smile on Julian's face faltered. He clearly hadn't expected the quiet academic to bite back. Cassandra's eyes lit up. She squeezed my arm tighter, pressing herself against me, the soft curve of her breast brushing against my arm without a hint of subtlety. I stiffened, fighting to keep my composure. "Cassie, we're in public. For God's sake." Julian's gaze flickered between us, his expression darkening. "A silver tongue, Mr. Vance," he sneered. "But it takes more than clever words to make it in this world." A woman like Cassandra needs a man who can shield her from the storm, not a bookworm hiding in an ivory tower, muttering about the past. That was a low blow. Before I could respond, Cassandra had had enough. Julian, her voice was glacial. The kind of man I choose is my business, not yours to comment on. And for the record, I know exactly what kind of man my husband is. In my eyes, he's worth 100 of you so-called elites with your money-grubbing souls. She grabbed my hand and pulled me away without a backward glance. She led me through the throng of people and out onto a terrace. The cool night air was a welcome relief. Don't listen to him, Cassandra said, letting go of my hand to straighten my tie. Her voice was tinged with apology. That's Julian Croft. He's my arch-rival. He asked me out back in law school, and he's never gotten over the rejection. I shouldn't have brought you here. I'm sorry. I looked at her. The concern in her eyes was real. It's okay, I shook my head. I'm used to it. Ever since the news of our marriage got out, I'd gotten my fair share of strange looks. She didn't understand. I mean, I'm used to being the subject of envy, I said with a small smile. She stared at me for a second, then broke into a grin, laughing like a child. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my chest. Ethan, you were so amazing just now, she said, her voice muffled. My body went rigid. I awkwardly patted her back. Okay, people are watching. She just hugged me tighter. I don't care. Let them be jealous. My husband is the best, and I'm not going to hide him. I sighed. It looked like tonight was going to be another long night. From the corner of my eye, I could feel Julian's cold, venomous glare fixed on us from across the ballroom. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. That man was not going to let this go. After the gala, for the first time in our marriage, Cassandra didn't pounce on me. Perhaps the encounter with Julian had soured her mood. She took a shower and went straight to bed, simply holding me from behind like a small cat seeking comfort. I had the best night's sleep I'd had in months, and woke up feeling so refreshed it was almost jarring. The next few days, Cassandra was swamped. I saw on the news that the lead counsel for the opposing firm in her Sterling Cole case was, of course, Julian Croft. The media was playing it up as a clash of the titans. She started coming home later and later. Sometimes I'd be asleep when she got in, and she'd be gone before I woke up. The time we spent together dwindled, but her passion found new outlets. She'd leave suggestive notes on my pillow. She sent me text messages that made my face burn. She even had things delivered to me at work. Strange things. Once, I was in the middle of a lecture on post-Civil War Reconstruction policies when a FedEx courier appeared at the classroom door. Package for Professor Ethan Vance. All of my students turned to stare at me. Completely baffled, I signed for the large, mysterious box. I couldn't very well open it in front of the whole class, so I set it beside the podium. For the rest of the lecture, my students were completely distracted, their eyes darting constantly toward the box. When class finally ended, I grabbed the package and practically ran back to my office. I shut the door and tore it open. Inside was a delicate, shockingly revealing black lace nightgown. Next to it was a card with Cassandra's elegant, flowing handwriting. Honey, picture yourself in this. Wait for me tonight. Love, your Cassie. I just stood there. For a moment, I seriously considered throwing myself and the box out the window. Cassandra, what in God's name are you thinking? I'm a man. I was so angry I almost ripped the thing to shreds, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. My face burning with humiliation, I shoved it into the deepest, darkest corner of my office closet. This life was becoming impossible. Just as I was reaching my breaking point, Cassandra announced she was taking a week off to take me on a vacation. A vacation? I stared at her, stunned. What about your case? The preliminary work is mostly done. It's the perfect time to relax before the trial begins, she said, bustling around and packing a suitcase. I've booked a private villa at a resort in the Keys. Just the two of us. Sun, sand, waves. It's going to be so romantic. I felt zero romance. All I felt was the icy dread of a man on death row being offered his last meal. A secluded island resort. No witnesses. No escape. I was going to be at her mercy. Could we maybe just stay home? I pleaded a last-ditch effort. Absolutely not, she said flatly. You have terrible dark circles under your eyes. You're obviously overworked. You need to get away and recharge. I wonder whose fault those dark circles are, I thought bitterly. In the end, I was bundled onto a plane against my will. The island was beautiful, no doubt about it. Turquoise water, white sand beaches, swaying palm trees. Our villa had its own private beach and an infinity pool. It was luxurious and completely isolated, but I was in no mood to appreciate the scenery. From the moment we arrived, it was as if some final restraint on Cassandra had been removed. During the day, she dragged me up and down the beach in a bikini. At night, she found ever more creative ways to research the applications of the black lace nightgown I'd been forced to pack. I didn't feel like I was on vacation. I felt like I was surviving a trial. On the evening of the third day, I was sprawled on a lounge chair, pretending to be dead, when Cassandra approached, carrying 2 mojitos and wearing a flowing white sundress. The setting sun haloed her, making her look ethereal. "Honey, are you tired? Have a drink," she said, handing one to me. I took it, my voice weak. "Cassie, can we make a deal? Tonight. Can I have the night off?" She blinked, her expression a mask of innocence. "Off. But we're on vacation. You know what I mean," I said, my gaze imploring. "If this keeps up, I'm literally going to die." She burst out laughing and leaned down to kiss my cheek. Okay, I'm just teasing you. You do look exhausted. I'll let you off the hook tonight." I was so relieved I could have wept. Really, she said, sitting down beside me and leaning her shoulder against mine. We watched the sun dip below the horizon. "Ethan, thank you for coming with me. You worked so hard. You deserve a break," I said, a rare wave of tenderness washing over me. She was quiet for a moment. "Actually," she said softly, "I didn't just bring you here to relax. Oh, I needed to escape," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "The Sterling Cole case. It's tougher than I thought. Julian is like a snake, always finding the most venomous angle of attack. I'm not sure I can win." It was the first time I had ever heard her admit to any kind of weakness. In my mind, Cassandra was always confident, always powerful, always invincible. A pang of protectiveness shot through me. I took her hand. "It's okay. You'll figure it out. You always do." She squeezed my hand back, burying her face in the crook of my neck like a child seeking shelter. In that moment, all my frustration and exhaustion melted away. Maybe her relentless, almost frantic need for me really was just a desperate search for a safe harbor. Just as the moment turned warm and intimate, a voice shattered the peace. "Cassandra? Fancy meeting you here. On vacation." I turned my head and saw the smirking face I had come to despise, Julian Croft. He was dressed in casual white linen, his hair perfectly coiffed, that signature, sickeningly confident smile plastered on his face. Cassandra's body went rigid. She sat up straight, the vulnerability vanishing from her face, instantly replaced by the familiar mask of the Ice Queen. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold enough to freeze the balmy air. "Business trip in the area. I heard the views here were nice, so I thought I'd check it out," Julian said, his eyes landing on me with a challenging glint. "Never expected to run into you and Mr. Vance. It must be fate." I stood up, moving to stand slightly in front of Cassandra, my eyes locked on him. This was no coincidence. The world wasn't that small. "You must have a lot of free time, Mr. Croft," I said coolly, "with such a big case about to go to trial." "That's where you're wrong, Professor," Julian chuckled. "It's precisely because I have everything under control that I have time to relax. Unlike some people who run away to a tropical island to find a moment's peace. But you can't run from what's coming." His words were like daggers, aimed directly at Cassandra's heart. Her face went pale. "Julian, what do you want?" "Nothing," he said with an innocent shrug. "Just want to give you a friendly reminder, Cassandra. You're going to lose the Sterling Cole case. But if you come to me now, beg for my help, maybe, for old time's sake, I'll let you walk away with some of your dignity intact." "In your dreams," she seethed, her body trembling with rage. "Then I'll see you in court," he said with a shrug, turning to leave. He took a few steps, then looked back over his shoulder at me. "And a word of advice, Professor. A man who hides behind a woman's skirt, a kept man, can't protect her. Everything you're enjoying right now will vanish the second she fails. I hope you'll be able to live with yourself then." He walked off, laughing. Cassandra stood frozen, swaying slightly on her feet. I quickly put my arm around her. "Cassie, don't listen to him. He's just trying to get in your head." She didn't speak, just bit her lips so hard I was afraid she'd draw blood. Her eyes filled with a vulnerability and confusion I had never seen before. Our romantic getaway was ruined. We packed our bags and were on a red-eye flight back to New York that night. On the plane, Cassandra didn't say a word. She just stared out the window into the blackness. I knew a real storm was coming. Back home, Cassandra was a different person. She no longer clung to me, no longer teased me, no longer even spoke to me. She locked herself in her home office, burying herself in case files day and night. The light under her door was often still on when the sun came up. I'd bring her food, and she'd either ignore it or take a few absent-minded bites. We became, in the truest sense of the word, strangers living under the same roof. When we passed each other in the hallway, her eyes were vacant, as if she were looking right through me. The king-sized bed felt like a continent, a vast, empty space between us. At first, I'll admit, I felt a sense of relief. I could finally get a full night's sleep. I had time to myself to read and prepare for my lectures. But the relief quickly faded, replaced by a profound and hollow loneliness. I realized I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to the silence. I wasn't used to the empty space beside me in bed, the absence of her warm body. I wasn't used to waking up and not finding one of her silly, loving notes. The apartment felt cavernous and terribly quiet. Without even noticing, I had grown accustomed to her torment. Her passion, her clinginess, her very presence had become an essential part of my life. Now that she had withdrawn it all, a part of my world had collapsed. One night, I got up for a glass of water and saw the light still on under her office door. On an impulse, I poured a glass of warm milk and pushed the door open. Cassandra had fallen asleep at her desk, slumped over a mountain of documents. Her brow was furrowed in a deep, worried frown. She looked exhausted. I walked over, quietly placed the milk on her desk, and took off my cardigan to drape over her shoulders. Just as my hand was about to touch her, her eyes flew open. "Who's there?" She shot up like a cornered animal, her eyes wild and defensive. When she saw it was me, the alarm in her eyes instantly turned to ice. "What are you doing in here?" I held up my cardigan. "I saw you were asleep. I didn't want you to get cold." "I don't need it," she said flatly. Her gaze fell to the glass of milk, and her frown deepened. "Take it with you, and don't come into my office again without my permission." Her tone was colder than if she were speaking to a stranger. My heart twisted. It was a physical pain. "Cassie, you." "Get out," she interrupted, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly. I stood there, looking at her pale face and the bloodshot veins in her eyes, a storm of emotions churning inside me. I silently picked up my cardigan and the milk and backed out of the room. The moment the door clicked shut, I heard a soft, muffled sob from inside. My world tilted on its axis. That bastard Julian. What had he done to her? The next day, for the first time in my career, I called in sick. I spent the morning online, searching for every piece of news about the Sterling Cole case. The more I read, the sicker I felt. The online narrative was completely one-sided. Dozens of anonymous sources were leaking stories, accusing Cassandra of using unethical tactics, even hinting at evidence tampering. An army of trolls on Twitter and Reddit was painting her as a greedy, soulless monster. They had even dug up information on me, calling me a trophy husband who was only a professor because of his wife's influence. The posts included my photo and the name of our apartment building. I read the vile comments, my hands shaking with rage. This was a coordinated attack, and there was no doubt in my mind who was behind it: Julian Croft. He wasn't just trying to beat her in court. He was trying to destroy her reputation, to ruin her completely. It was despicable. I couldn't just sit back and watch this happen. Cassandra was my wife. I couldn't let her be bullied and broken. Julian had called me a kept man who couldn't protect her. A year ago, those words might have cut me deep. But now all I wanted was to prove him wrong. My name is Ethan Vance. I'm a history professor. I may not have his money or his power, but I have my own way of fighting. I took a deep breath and logged into Columbia's academic databases and several international library archives. My greatest weapons were a historian's patience and a researcher's precision. You want to play dirty, Julian? I thought. Let's see what happens when I start turning over rocks. I began to dig. Julian Croft, Ivy League law school, clerked for a famous judge, undefeated since he made partner. I pulled up every major case he'd ever argued. A pattern emerged. Julian was a master of manipulating the media and exploiting procedural loopholes. He didn't win by being a better lawyer. He won by playing mind games, by attacking his opponents outside the courtroom until their nerve broke. And that's exactly what he was doing to Cassandra. The smear campaign seemed random, but when I mapped it out, all the accusations pointed to one thing: a key financial report Sterling Cole had provided to Cassandra. Julian's entire strategy was to convince the world that this report was a fabrication. If he succeeded, Cassandra wouldn't just lose the case. She could face disbarment and even prison time for presenting false evidence. It was a vicious, brilliant move. But how could I prove the report was authentic? I wasn't an accountant or a lawyer. The complex data meant nothing to me. I holed myself up in our guest room for 2 days straight, covering the walls with printouts, drawing lines, making connections, searching for anything. Just as I was about to give up, my eyes landed on an old press photo I'd found. It was from a few years ago, showing the CEO of Sterling Cole signing a deal with an overseas firm. In the background, there was a bookshelf filled with old ledgers. On the spine of one of the ledgers was a tiny, blurred logo. I'd seen it before. I shot up and ran to my own study, tearing through my collection of old books and journals. Finally, in a dusty tome about the economic history of New York's Gilded Age, I found it. It was the maker's mark of Blackwood and Sons, a defunct 19th century stationer that specialized in creating custom, counterfeit-proof ledgers for robber barons and banking tycoons. They used a proprietary paper and ink that, under specific light frequencies, would reveal an invisible watermark. Could it be? A wild theory began to form in my mind. I immediately called my old friend Dave, a curator at the Met. Dave, I need a huge favor. I need you to look up the formula for a specific type of Gilded Age security ink. Dave was confused by my frantic, out-of-the-blue request, but after I pleaded with him, he agreed. An hour later, he called back, his voice buzzing with excitement. Ethan, where did you find this? This is the proprietary formula from the old Blackwood ledgers. It was thought to be lost forever. How did you? No time to explain. I cut him off. Can you replicate the conditions to view the watermark? It would be tricky, but yes, definitely. Good. I'm scanning you a document. I need you to check it for a watermark, and I need it done yesterday. After hanging up, I ran to her office door. I hesitated for only a second before pounding on it with my fist. Cassie, open the door. I have something important to show you. Silence. Cassandra, open the door. I hit it harder. If you don't open this door, I swear I will break it down. After a few tense seconds, the lock clicked. Cassandra stood there, looking even more haggard than before, her eyes raw and bloodshot. She stared at me, her expression cold and foreign. What do you want now? I didn't answer. I pushed past her, went to her desk, and picked up the financial report, the very document Julian was claiming was a fake. I need to borrow this. What are you going to do with it? She asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Save you. I left her standing there, stunned, and raced out of the apartment. I got the report to Dave at the museum in record time. This is it. Be careful with it, I said, panting as I spread it on the conservation table. Dave, wearing white gloves, handled the document with a scholar's reverence. Ethan, are you sure? This looks like standard printer paper. I'm sure. Just try it. I urged. He nodded and led me into a pitch-black archival room. He switched on a strange-looking ultraviolet lamp, adjusted the wavelength, and aimed the beam at the report. And then, magic happened. Under the specialized light, the plain white paper with its black text began to glow. Faint, golden patterns slowly materialized across the page, like invisible ink coming to life. The intricate patterns formed the unmistakable logo of Blackwood and Sons. My God, Dave whispered in awe. It's the Blackwood watermark. This is incredible. I could finally breathe. My wild gamble had paid off. The founder of Sterling Cole was descended from an old Gilded Age banking family. They had maintained their ancestors' obsession with security and secrecy. This seemingly ordinary report was printed on their own custom, proprietary security paper. Julian Croft could never have known. Even Cassandra, out of professional respect for her client, had never questioned the physical document, only the data it contained. Julian had built his entire case on the idea that the report was a forgery. He never dreamed that the paper itself was the ultimate proof of its authenticity. Dave, I need an official, notarized report from the museum's conservation department. And I need it now, I said, gripping his shoulders. You'll have it. This is a major historical find. I'll get right on it. Clutching the signed and sealed authentication report, I sped back home, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I'm not a kept man. I'm not just a bookworm. This is my wife, and I will protect her. It was late when I burst back into the apartment. The living room was dark, but a sliver of light still shone from under the office door. I pushed it open. Cassandra was sitting at her desk, her back to me, her silhouette looking small and fragile. She heard me and turned. A flicker of something, confusion, hope, crossed her face before the icy mask slipped back into place. You're back. I didn't speak. I walked straight to her desk and slapped the museum's authentication report and the photos of the glowing watermark down in front of her. Read it. Cassandra frowned. Her curiosity piqued. She picked up the report. As she read, her eyes grew wider and wider. When she saw the photos, her famously unshakable composure finally shattered, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. She shot her head up, her lips trembling. What? How is this possible? Sterling Cole's founder comes from the old Van Horn banking family, I explained calmly. They've been using their ancestral security paper for generations. That report is physically impossible to forge. Julian Croft's entire case is built on a false premise. He's lost. I said it simply, like I was stating a historical fact. The room was filled with a deafening silence. Cassandra just stared at me, her eyes slowly welling up, turning red. The impenetrable fortress of ice she had built around herself began to crack and splinter. Yep. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. After a long moment, she finally managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. Why would you help me? After how I've treated you. Because you're my wife, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. Julian was right about one thing. I'm just a quiet professor. I can't give you $1 billion fortune or an empire. But Cassandra Thorne, you listen to me. As long as I am alive, I will never let anyone hurt you. Anyone who tries will have to go through me. As the words left my mouth, the dam broke. Cassandra's tears finally came, a flood of emotion she could no longer contain. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing like a lost child who had finally found her way home. All the pressure, the fear, the loneliness, and the despair of the past weeks came pouring out. I held her tight, letting her tears soak the front of my shirt. I had never seen her like this, so completely vulnerable. Even the strongest queen needs a harbor where she can lower her shields. And I was her harbor. She cried for a long time, until she was exhausted, her sobs quieting in my arms. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen, her voice thick. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I placed a finger on her lips. Don't say anything. I understand. She used her passion to feel secure, to confirm I was still there. When the crisis hit, she used her coldness to push me away, afraid of dragging me down with her, determined to face it alone. This stubborn, foolish woman. From now on, you don't face anything alone, I said, cupping her face in my hands. If the sky falls, I'll be there to help you hold it up. And if I can't, I'll be right there with you when it comes crashing down. A small, watery laugh escaped her lips, even as tears still clung to her eyelashes. That's a terrible metaphor. She gave my chest a weak punch, a gesture that was more of a caress. So, are you going back to work in here? I asked. She shook her head, wrapping her arms around my waist and burying her face in my chest. No, she mumbled. I want to sleep with my husband. I smiled and scooped her up into my arms. She let out a small gasp and instinctively looped her arms around my neck. It's late. We should get some rest, I said, a meaningful glint in my eye. A deep blush spread across her face, all the way to the tips of her ears. She stammered, hiding her face in my shoulder. I carried her into our bedroom. That night, there was no frantic passion, no desperate conquest. There was only a deep, unending tenderness. We were each other's solace, each other's home. On the day of the trial, I took a personal day and sat in the gallery. Cassandra stood before the judge, dressed in her lawyer's robes, her gaze steady and her presence commanding. The queen was back on her throne. When Julian's legal team once again presented their evidence that the financial report was a fabrication, Cassandra just smiled faintly. She didn't argue. Instead, she petitioned the judge for a technical demonstration to be performed in the courtroom. When Dave, the museum expert, walked in with his specialized equipment, and when the supposedly fake report began to glow under the UV light, revealing its unique, counterfeit-proof watermark, a collective gasp went through the courtroom. The color drained from Julian Croft's face. He stared at the glowing document, his expression a mask of horror and disbelief. He had lost, and he had lost spectacularly. The rest was a formality. Cassandra's counterattack was swift and brutal. She not only won the case, but immediately filed a countersuit against Julian for defamation and malicious prosecution. Facing evidence of witness tampering and presenting fraudulent claims, Julian was disbarred. His career was over. When we walked out of the courthouse, the sun was shining. Reporters swarmed around Cassandra, a barrage of flashing cameras and shouted questions. She ignored them all. Her eyes scanned the crowd and found me. She walked straight toward me, and in front of everyone, stood on her toes and gave me a long, deep kiss. "Honey," she said, her smile radiant, "let's go home." I smiled back, took her hand, and held it tight. After the storm, life seemed to return to normal, but something fundamental between us had changed. She was still the ice queen in the courtroom, and I was still the mild-mannered professor. But at home, our dynamic had shifted. She was no longer attached to my hip every second of the day, but her reliance on me had deepened in a new way. When she worked in her office, she left the door open. Every so often, she would look up from her papers and glance out at me reading in the living room, as if just seeing me was enough to keep her grounded. At night, she was no longer the insatiable inferno. Instead, she would curl up against me like a cat, falling asleep to the sound of my heartbeat. She told me it was the most soothing sound in the world. And I had changed, too. I was no longer afraid of her passion or hesitant about her affection. I started to meet her halfway, to care for her proactively. I would bring her lunch at her high-powered law firm and feel a secret thrill at the shocked expressions on the faces of her associates. I'd have a hot bath waiting for her when she came home after a grueling day in court. I started to look forward to her coming home, to the moment she'd kick off her heels, shed her power suit, and launch herself into my arms like a joyful cannonball, telling me all about the legal dragon she had slain that day. I never knew being needed, being trusted so completely, could feel this good. Today was our first wedding anniversary. I left campus early, made a reservation in her favorite restaurant, and bought a huge bouquet of her favorite white roses. I had just finished arranging them in a vase when the front door opened. Cassandra was home. She stopped short, taking in the roses and the candlelight on the dining table. "Honey, what's the occasion?" "Guess." I smiled, pulling a small velvet box from behind my back. Her eyes lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. I opened the box. Inside was a pair of simple, elegant platinum bands. No diamonds, just our initials engraved on the inside. E, V, and C, T. "Happy anniversary, counselor," I said, taking one of the rings and sliding it onto her finger. Her eyes grew misty. She looked down at the ring on her hand and whispered, "So cheesy, professor." But the corners of her mouth were turned up in a huge smile. She took the other ring and carefully placed it on my finger. "Happy anniversary, professor." We looked at each other and smiled. Nothing more needed to be said. After dinner, we curled up on the sofa to watch a movie. It was a sappy, predictable romance, but she was completely engrossed, secretly wiping away tears on my shoulder during the sad parts. I held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling a profound sense of peace. "Ethan," she said suddenly, "do you remember the first time we met?" "Of course," I smiled. "The guest lecture at the law school. You were wearing that black suit. You were so intimidating, I was scared to even look at you." "Did you know," she said, turning to look at me, her eyes shining, "that my palms were sweating the entire time?" "What?" I was stunned. It was my first big public lecture. I was terrified I was going to bomb, she admitted, a little embarrassed. I was acting all cool and collected on the outside, but inside my heart was pounding. Until I saw you. "You saw me?" She nodded. "You were sitting in the third row by the window. The sunlight was on you, and you were listening so intently. nodding and taking notes. In that huge auditorium, it felt like you were the only person who was really hearing me. And suddenly, I wasn't nervous anymore. I never imagined we'd had that connection before we even knew each other. So, when our parents set us up, and I saw it was you, I said yes without a second thought, she said, snuggling closer. I just had a feeling that you were a man who could make me feel safe. A wave of immense tenderness washed over me. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. And do you feel safe now? What do you think? She whispered, her eyes turning sultry. She tilted her head up and met my lips with her own. This kiss was different from all the others. It wasn't demanding or possessive. It was slow and deep and filled with a bone-deep intimacy. When we finally broke apart, she was breathless, her cheeks flushed. Professor, she breathed into my ear, her voice a seductive whisper. I hear all those vitality supplements you've been taking can have some serious side effects if you don't find a proper outlet. I paused for a second, then groaned, half in exasperation, half in amusement. And what do you propose? I propose, she said, her eyes dancing with mischief as she hooked her arms around my neck, that you let your loving wife, Counselor Thorne, help you with your stress relief. Looking down at the bewitching, beautiful woman in my arms, I laughed. Some things, I supposed, would never change. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I shifted my weight, gently rolling her on her back and pinning her beneath me. I looked down into her eyes, which were shining like a galaxy of stars. All right, I whispered, my voice low. But this time, we'll see who's relieving whom. Outside, the moonlight poured through the window. Inside, the night was just beginning. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my life with my Ice Queen lawyer would be anything but quiet. And I wouldn't have it any other way.